Hi, my name is Shanda Rule. I'm a singer, storyteller, joy spreader, and host of the Courageous Voice podcast. The Courageous Voice podcast gathers and shares stories from artistic folks around the world and their journeys through fear, courageousness, and creativity. Join us and get inspired with me as we chat about learning to befriend and walk with and past our fears to share our voices courageously with the world. Hello, 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 and welcome to the Courageous Voice podcast. My name is Shanda Rule. Welcome. Listen, I am excited to welcome our guest today. I have so many words about Miss Rebecca. This is Rebecca Stevens Walters. She is she's many things, but she's a mom, y'all. And I feel like that's informing a lot of things. She's a mom. She is a pastor. She's a coach. She's a wife. She is an intergenerational worship creator, a musician, a children's liberation theologian, and the tagline on her website says, "Inspiring liberation for all generations." I love this. Welcome.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Oh my gosh. It's so good to be here. I'm just going to say it like, I love that we can do this. You're in a different country and sitting in my bed in Brooklyn. And this is a miracle to me. This is a miracle.
Yes.
I think that miracles are abundant, actually. Like I think they happen so frequently. And this is one of them. And I'm so excited.
Yeah, me too. Listen, you mentioning Brooklyn, and I wanted to say that you were a New Yorker too, because I think that's important. But
I am a New Yorker, very
you are
proud
a
New Yorker. Yeah.
And I love what
Transplant.
still, it's all good. I claim New York. I'm a transplant from Hazel Crest,
There you go.
Illinois.
Actually, sometimes I say refugee.
Yeah, I get it.
A lot of people that come to New York are escaping something, running from something. And
this is true.
I didn't know I was until a couple years after I got here. And I was like, oh, this is better. And where I was. But yeah, from North Carolina, the South.
Are you from North Carolina?
I'm from North Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
all right.
Yeah.
What were you running from or running towards?
So I left my first marriage. I was married previously and we had no kids. We had a dog. And literally the day that we decided to separate, I was looking for apartments in New York. I was just like, this is it. This is now or never. I was in my early 30s. I wasn't young and coming to party. I really came here to start my life over and discover myself. And I considered other cities. I was like, oh, New Orleans could be cool. Nashville could be cool. San Francisco could be cool. But I knew that New York had everything. And I imagined my divorce like a birth. And so, however I came out of that process, New York would have something to offer me. So, and I did. The first few years I lived here, I worked a big corporate job. I had a very lucrative corporate job. I also spent a lot of time playing bluegrass in some dive bars down in the East Village and getting to know a little bit of the bluegrass world in New York, which is a thing. Yeah. And then I was called to ministry by God, which really makes me mad sometimes, but anyway.
And I was going to say, we met in seminaries. Okay.
Yeah.
What was your call? Listen, I'm enjoying learning more about you. I had no idea. So you're in this big corporate job, you're making some nice cash, you have even time to pursue your love of music because you're a musician, and then you get this call. So what was this like? Was it really obvious? Did you fight it? Did you willingly say, okay?
I had imposter syndrome. So if I fought it, it was because I thought, surely not me. But what happened is when I came to New York, I was crossing the Williamsburg Bridge to come into Manhattan from the airport. And I took a picture from the cab of the Manhattan skyline and I posted it on Facebook. This was when Facebook was the only thing around. This was a little over 10 years ago. And the only people that I knew really in the city saw that post, and they happened to be pastors. And it goes back years because I hadn't been in the church in years. I grew up in the Presbyterian church and was very active, but I hadn't been to church probably in 10 years. And so they saw that post and they said, "Hey, you're in New York, you live in New York, you should come to our church," which was on the Upper East Side. And I went, and this was the first church I had ever been to that was open and affirming. And in fact, the first Sunday that I went was Pride Sunday. And we left immediately after worship and went down to march in the Manhattan Pride Parade.
Mm-hmm.
And that really changed my life. I really felt like church became a place where I had community. I didn't know anybody in New York. I didn't have any way of finding meaning in the music world in New York. It's rough to be trying to find some kind of meaning when you're just really trying to meet the right people or whatever. Same thing in the corporate world. I was working for a company that certainly saw itself as having meaning, but for me, I was like,
Okay.
no.
Okay.
But church and my faith, like I rediscovered my faith and really understood God as a liberator. And then by happenstance, through sort of some music channels in New York City, I got hired to play a gig at First Pres Manhattan. And Emily Scott was the children's music director there at the time. And so I came and I brought my fiddle, and we didn't even rehearse. I didn't even meet Emily. I think maybe we rehearsed, maybe we went through the song one time. But anyway, we go into worship. I play my little fiddle tune with the kids. I leave. 2 weeks later, Emily emailed me and said, "Hey, thanks for coming and playing this gig. Would you like my job?"
Okay.
And I was like, "What is this?" And at the same time, my boss at my corporate job was taking me under his wing to be a mentor. And I really did have to like think about it. So what I did was that I said, "Okay, I'm going to meet with Emily and we'll see." And I said, "I'm going to be very practical about this," because it was a part-time job. And I did the math and I said, "Okay, if this ministry job or it was a music ministry job, pays half of what my corporate job pays, then I can afford it."
Okay.
And so I go to this meeting with Emily and she's telling me all about the job. And I'm telling her a little bit about myself. And finally I said, "I don't know if this is appropriate. I was new to New York and that kind of thing. I need to know how much this is going to pay." And she told me, and it was exactly half of what I was making at my corporate job.
Okay.
And so it's weird to see the finances as like a sign, but at the time I was single and I was independent in terms of my own finances. And so it was like, okay. And then it was also just, again, this like missing piece of meaning in my professional life.
Okay.
And so I left my corporate job and I started this job at First Pres Manhattan. And shortly after that, it came very clear to me that I wanted more language and more tools for working with multi-generational and intergenerational congregations. And so I applied to seminary, which again was like this really big long shot for me. I never thought I was going to go to grad school, certainly. And here I am in New York City applying to grad school. Yeah. And shortly thereafter, I started school at Union, and that's where I met Zachary, and that's where my first baby was born, and the rest is history.
Wow. So did your interest in intergenerational worship start there?
It did, because at that time, people were having very serious conversations about the decline in church. And I really felt, and I do still feel like, that there's no decline in spirituality or in
Okay.
religion, right? There's no decline. It's just being transferred.
Okay.
And the joke that I tell is that people are going to find spirituality somewhere, even if it's at Soul Cycle.
I
Right?
totally get you. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally.
And
Wow.
so I started to research, and this was part of my thesis work, why churches were losing money and members and why people were leaving. And what I learned was that it starts in childhood,
Hmm.
that we send this often, sometimes subliminal, but sometimes very clear message to children that they're not welcome there. And so
Okay.
then they grow up and leave,
Hmm.
or they grow up and continue the cycle.
Hmm.
It then became my mission to bring this to the attention of the wider church.
Okay.
And so my academic work in children's liberation theology actually came later.
Okay. All right. And so this probably leads to what stood out to me, your hashtag, I think it was eradicate Sunday school. So tell me, so what does this look like?
The movement to do away with Sunday school is a reculturing. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just a project. It's not just a committee. It's not just a switch. It's taking a practice that's about 120 years old and very rooted in the white Protestant church, and saying, actually, there's a different way to teach children and ourselves, grown-ups, about what church is.
What does this look like on Sunday morning?
Right.
Tell me more about your vision.
Yes, the reason why we do intergenerational worship as a thing is because I believe that's the most important thing a church does.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like where we start, because
Okay.
everything can fan out from there. And the word that I keep using most recently is accessibility. And so when we talk about intergenerational church culture, we're talking about who can get there and who can be there, and who can get there safely and who can be there safely. When my kids were babies, particularly my firstborn, I would go to a church with my baby by myself, unannounced, just randomly, and see how people reacted to me and what was available to me and what was available to my baby. What I tell people is, wherever a wheelchair can't go, neither can a stroller,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
There were people in the church who, when the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, was being proposed and coming around to be signed into law, churches lobbied to be excluded from it.
Really?
Yeah. And they succeeded. And so now we have a bunch of churches, and Brooklyn, I know, has more churches per square mile than anywhere in the country.
Really?
Mhm.
Okay.
So we have more churches. We have all of this space, right? New York City, especially, where space is a commodity.
Mm-hmm.
We have all of this space, millions and millions of dollars worth of space, millions of square feet worth of space, in which there is an entire group of people. And I would say two entire groups of people. So people with disabilities and children
Mm-hmm.
are not fully welcome and can't fully participate. And
Okay.
asking churches to be intergenerational is about asking churches to completely reculture themselves toward accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that includes, again, very practical things like ramps and elevators. It also includes things like sign language interpreters. It includes things like, and people don't like to hear me say this, but screens, big screens where people can see either the bulletin or whoever's in the pulpit, or words to the hymns.
Mm-hmm.
It also means being allergen free, making sure that the top allergens are not present at things like communion and that kind of thing. And what I tell people is that your average hymnal weighs about 3 to 5 pounds,
Hmm.
and no child can hold that, nor does a child care about what's on the page, right? But
Okay.
also a person with arthritis can't hold a
Hmm.
hymnal, and a person who's holding a baby is not going to be holding a hymnal. And a person who is blind is not going to be necessarily holding a hymnal, although we don't know. I don't know what an individual would want to do, but it's just this message that we send
Mm-hmm.
when We say the only access you have to the music in this church is to sing out of this hymnal. The only access you have to the worship service is to sit still for an hour. The only access you have to the actual building is to walk up a steep staircase.
Hmm.
And those things are symbols. They're very
Yeah.
real symbols.
Yeah. You were saying earlier that you think people will find their ways to edify themselves spiritually, whether
Yeah.
it's at church or Soul Cycle. So, what do you think the culture is saying about that? What direction are we headed in?
There are a couple of things happening, and as not to be here all day, I'll pick one. Parenting is changing. And
Hmm.
I'll speak to parenting because I'm in it right now. And parenting changes with every generation, right? We learn new things about child development. Our culture changes. Parenting changed during the pandemic. And now, really, the way that we think about parenting, even than we did 5 years ago, is very different. And the church is slow to evolve with that. So, Sunday school, for example, is about one or two generations old. Sunday school came around the turn of the 20th century.
Okay.
And it was a thing that was helpful at that time. But now it's not helpful anymore because parenting has changed and the way that we think about teaching has changed. Education itself, what we know about the way children learn has changed, and what we know about the way children can learn, want to be involved, want to be engaged. We know more. And so often I'll be in a workshop and I'll say, okay, raise your hand if you've ever heard this sentiment. This is a little bit of an illustration. Raise your hand if you've heard people say, we are losing young families to Sunday morning sports. And I think every time I've asked that question, every person in the room has raised their hand. And so what I say to that is this: here you have soccer games on Sunday morning, or you have church. If I had to choose between soccer on Sunday morning, in which perhaps my kid gets to be around their friends, they get to do something enriching, something good for their body, they get to be around helpful adults who are interested in them. They
Hmm.
do an activity that centers them, that centers their development and their joy. Or I can take them to church where I have to fight them to be quiet. They have to wear clothes that they hate. They have to listen to somebody talk at them for 20 minutes. They have to sing songs they don't care about, and they have to be told what to believe. Now, which one am I going to choose for my kid? You know,
Hmm.
that to me, it's such an obvious choice. Of course, parents are choosing that.
Hmm.
Of course, parents are going, you know what? I'm going to take my kid to soccer because my kid actually wants to be there.
Okay.
And again, that's a very generalized illustration, but I actually think that is what is happening, that parents are choosing things for their kids that are for their kids. I think churches have to contend with the fact that for a really long time, we got away with decentering children. For about 150 years or so in the white Protestant church, everything has swung toward adults. Okay.
Okay.
We have nice little Sunday school. We might have a little nursery, but the church has been built quite literally and spiritually for adults, right?
Okay.
And children have been asked to fit into that. So we've been swinging to this pendulum toward adults for about 150 years or so. And now what I challenge people to do is to swing that pendulum all the way back to children, because people will say, you're talking about children's worship. This isn't intergenerational. This is for children. And I have two responses to that. One, we all need to be more childlike. And two, yes, we have to swing that pendulum back to correct the
Hmm.
trauma and the oppression that we have inflicted on children for generations. And eventually that pendulum comes back to the middle. But right now we have corrections to make. Um,
Okay.
and yeah, so for me, it is about recentering children and
Hmm.
decentering adults. And also the question is intentions. Why do we have Sunday school? What are we actually doing? And I actually believe that what we have to always be doing is participating in liberation. And so
Hmm.
does it liberate a child to have them to sit there and do some kind of prescribed coloring sheet weird thing? Does it liberate a child to have them sit through a 20-minute sermon? What does the liberation of children look like
Yeah.
in a church setting?
Yeah.
Because, and I'll say a couple things about children's liberation, which is that, first of all, liberation in oppressive communities comes from the community itself, right? However, children don't have political power or social power. And so children can't actually enact their own liberation.
Hmm.
And so we adults have to participate, right?
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
separatist movement for children because there is a role for adults to play in that process. And so what then becomes complicated about children's liberation is that adults have to be working for our own liberation as well.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm thinking that because the church that I grew up with was very steeped in Black liberation theology.
Right.
And I think that may have made a huge difference because there was so much for kids. We had Saturday church school, Sunday church school.
Right.
We also had dance and my ministry led by adults that were so invested
Yes.
in liberation theology and liberation for the community. So it's a different context, but also interesting.
I am always doing this work with white people. It's not been my experience
Mm.
that Black people are looking for ways to do this because I think that white people don't know our own self-harm. I think when we think about accessibility in churches and we think about who is really welcome there, who is
Mhm.
really not there at all, and why,
Mhm.
I'm talking about whiteness and
Mm.
white supremacy hurts everyone,
Mm.
including ourselves, and how we're just constantly causing our own harm by enacting whiteness
Mm.
across our communities and everywhere else.
Wow. I think that historically in America in particular, it's just a different history. Like the Black church history
Yes,
was like, okay, let's come together. This is one of the only places we can come
right.
together and have community, or the only place that we can be accepted and we can accept each other and lift each other up. I feel like there's a completely different context, which is interesting. Okay. So tell me how you are enacting this in your ministry, because I know that you had something on YouTube. What was it called? New Ways of Being.
Yes.
Are you still doing that?
So we're on a hiatus,
Okay.
and I'll talk about why because it's all related.
Yes.
So even before pandemic, for years, really from when I was beginning my ministry, beginning in seminary, I really felt like that one of the barriers to worship is our lack of use of the internet
Okay.
and technology. So for years I was like, every church should be broadcasting. Why aren't we broadcasting? And of course it's hard to get people on board with that. And then pandemic happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat back in my chair because literally overnight churches figured out how to broadcast their worship services over the
Hmm.
internet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when I say I think miracles happen, it was a miracle. It was, and not because pandemic is a good thing, but to see the church scramble, frankly, to me was miraculous. And so that that shift in the way that churches saw themselves in terms of ability, oh, we can just do this, and actually not can, but we have to. Like
Mm-hmm.
our survival as an institution rests on people's ability to be able to get on the internet. Ooh. And so through the pandemic, and the pandemic was very difficult for me and my family. We left New York. My daughter turned 1 on March 16th of 2020. And
Wow.
that day we decided we have to leave. And we left the next day. We literally left dishes in the sink. So we flew out to New Mexico where my in-laws live, very rural New Mexico. And we were there for 5.5 months. And while we were there, a lot of things happened professionally for me that were hard. Some of my church communities really floundered because of the pandemic and because of the way things were unfolding. There were a lot of financial woes. I got really sick. I got meningitis and spent 10 days in a COVID overrun hospital.
Oh my God.
Literally, my hospital room was a closet. And in the emergency room, they didn't have a bed for me. So I laid on a gurney for 4 days.
Oh
But
my God.
it was crazy. And so my ministry shifted at that time because I knew that churches were not going to ever be the same. And I knew that what I had been doing with churches that I was getting so much resistance was actually going to happen. And I was going to have to either jump on that boat, actually believe in myself, believe in my prophecy, or I was going to have to get out of ministry. And it was like do or die, right? So I doubled down on it. And I did do a couple of seasons of New Ways of Being, which was my Instagram podcast. And then A Moment of Hope and was my YouTube
That's
series.
okay. Yes.
Yeah. And then I did a brief series called Heart Check weekly. So 2 of them were on YouTube and 1 was on Instagram. And I kept thinking, as an entrepreneur, is this something that I market? Is this something that I take to a church and say, hey, do you want to hire me as your digital pastor? And there are churches that did that and that have digital pastors. I started asking myself, what is the best way? Because I really believed in the material. I believed in the content in terms of it being very real and powerful ministry. And so I thought, what is the best way to get this out there? I don't really have a church. And even if I did, the Protestant church is not great at distribution. So what does that look like? And so I started to think about what I know as a musician, what I know about the music business, what I know about the arts business, what I know about publishing, just all these little like things that I've learned over the years. And I put it all together, and it finally I say it came to me in a dream, and it really did, because woke up one day and was like, oh, we need a centralized platform. And so I started looking around at Netflix, Hulu. This was right around when Disney Plus came about. And I noticed that, first of all, they all look very similar, but that they are intergenerational places on the internet. My kids are watching stuff on Netflix, and so is my 81-year-old father. So to me, it just made sense to imagine that lots of churches and lots of ministers are creating beautiful content. And the pandemic really gave us the impetus to do that. And the pandemic also shifted a lot of people away from brick and mortar churches for good reasons, some, and for some sad reasons. And I just kept thinking, for me, what if I decided I don't ever want to go to church again, but I don't want to really lose a spiritual life, what could I find that on the internet? If you go on YouTube and try and search children's Christian content, you get some real nonsense.
Okay.
So I don't recommend it. Okay. And so I thought, what does this look like to have a centralized platform where people know they can go to get vetted, progressive, queer affirming, intergenerational affirming content? And so For People Media Ministries was born. We are in the developing stages. The platform itself is being built right now.
Congratulations. Oh my God. This is huge.
It feels huge. Like everyone that I talk to about it, they're like, oh my God, like we really need this. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I thought so too. Like, it's nice that my idea is not, it's a bit revolutionary enough that people are like excited about it, but it's also like not weird. People are
Mm-mm.
like, oh, that makes total sense. We need this. So we are partnered with 1001 New Worshiping Communities, which is a PCUSA mission agency initiative, and
Mhm.
we're grant funded through them. We are creating, I joke we're creating Netflix for church, but
I love that. It's so clear. I was
it's
like,
so
oh, that's
clear,
great.
right? And also we do want it to be, we want people to feel like when you go on to For People, onto the platform, you're there with other people. And we hope to have live events, and we hope to have plenty of space for people to comment. And
Mm-hmm.
we hope that people will watch events when things premiere. Right now, again, we're in the very much the developing stages. And also it just really does feel like it's very real. We hope to launch with a children's animated series,
Wow,
um,
nice.
some kind of worship. So what we hope to do is partner with churches, who are already producing their worship services for the internet. So
Mm-hmm.
churches who have production equipment and who are already, know about things like editing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so what we hope to do is partner with churches who are doing that and stream their content on For People. So again, we can be the distributor and take that off the plate of churches of trying to grow their YouTube followers, which is
Mm-hmm.
a whole job in itself.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, For People has a budget for that, and we have a team for that. So that is For People. And we also, I
Wow.
will also just say that we are taking submissions light. Like, I haven't officially announced that we're taking submissions, but
Okay.
if people want to reach out to me, they can. You can just email me at rebecca@forpeople.media.
Wow.
And I'll send out a submission form. For me, I want to see it all. I want to see everyone's crazy idea. I want to hear everyone's vision for whatever they want to create. And I would say to people to also not keep it to video. We are hoping to expand, and I would say sooner rather than later, into a record label and a publishing house.
Wow.
And yeah, so if we have For People Media Ministries, and can then also have For People Music. And I think of it like this. So it's For People, and people like dance around that title, but I came up with it because I do want to have these branches. So right
Mm-hmm.
now we have church for people, or we have music for people. I'd like to have books for people. I'd like to
Hmm.
even have curricula for people.
Okay.
So my hope is that For People is just the beginning, is just the baseline,
Wow.
for and a whole world of ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, this is an awesome and huge undertaking.
I didn't know when I got into this that this is tech, right?
Wow.
And I didn't know that. And now I'm like, it's a whole world that, again, I think the church is poised to get there. What the Protestant church has done in this country in terms of our cultural practices is that we've let mega churches and evangelicals corner the market on,
Hmm.
content like
On a
this,
lot of stuff, but
on a lot of stuff,
yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so we've let them corner the market. And I do, if I go look at Hillsong's children's content now,
Mm-hmm.
again, theologically, no thank you, and I would never let my children watch it, but visually it's beautiful.
Hmm.
It's quality in terms of the way it's produced, and
Mm-hmm.
it's readily available. And
Yeah.
so to me, we have catch up to do, but also just this incredible, it's the same thing about accessibility in the brick and mortar church. We
Hmm.
have this incredible opportunity to reach people that evangelicals and mega church type theologies can't reach. because they're just generally difference affirming. So just think that we have this incredible opportunity to have a market, have a community, have a world in which people see the Protestant church as a place where they can actually be safe and or can be working towards safety.
Yeah. Okay, tell us where we can find out more about For People, where we can find you.
Yes.
If people have questions, we can get a launch date, all those kind of things, mailing lists.
Yes. So definitely email. So my email is rebecca@forpeople.media. Email me questions. You can look at my website. Also, I would say
What's your website?
Oh yeah, RebeccaStevensWalter.com. All one word, RebeccaStevensWalter.com. And you can go on there. You can also stream my album, which I recorded and released 10 days before lockdown in 2020. Also, some of the things that I offer in terms of consulting work and coaching and leadership. I also want to say, if folks want to be involved with For People on any level, if you want to serve on the board, if you want to create content, if you want to be in the advisory team, I highly encourage that. We want to have a team that not only understands, we want to have a team that it has a diversity of understanding of what we're doing. So there's ministers, there's digital ministers, there are tech people, there are queer activists. So we want to have an array of perspectives. And so I'm inviting really anybody who wants to be involved to reach out, and let's see where we can place people.
Wow, this is beautiful. I'm excited.
I'm excited. Thank you. As you can tell, I love talking about it, and I have a lot of passion for everything I do. And I'm grateful to you for giving me the space to talk about it, and also your beautiful questions and curiosity, and also just like your beautiful self and your energy. I'm grateful.
Thank you.
I'm grateful to you. Really grateful to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
I'll keep you posted. The 3 shows that I have on hiatus now will move over to For People, but now they're on YouTube and IG, and I just encourage people to go. I do have some cool stuff on YouTube, some of it from the pandemic when a lot of people were just, I gotta do something. So there's some cool stuff over on YouTube. Folks can follow me, can subscribe to my YouTube page. I also have some children's liberation theology content over on TikTok.
Oh, okay.
If folks want to know more about what that is, you can follow me on TikTok at Anew, ANEW Rebecca. Same thing on Instagram at Anew Rebecca. And I tweet about children's liberation theology, and particularly the critiques of the white Protestant church on Twitter.
Okay. And what's your YouTube handle?
My YouTube handle is Rebecca Stevens Walter.
Perfect. Okay. All right.
Yes.
We enjoy checking all that stuff out. Yes, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Blessings to you. Blessings to Kite, your whole family. All like your life in Vienna, which just sounds so sexy to me.
Oh my God.
And come back to New York. I will always say that to you.
Oh my God. Yes. 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 The Courageous Voice podcast is a collaboration between Connect.Faith and me, Shanda Rule. Music is by Ike Sturm and production by Jess Burchett. Thanks for listening.